An unexpected tremor of distorted hyperspace announced the arrival of a massive human warship, a shrill alarm ringing across the battlefield. Hostile alien forces went quiet, confused and terrified. Nobody was counting on humanity intervening, especially not in the form of a pivotal, game-changing clock stop. For eons, the galaxy had been caught in a never-ending struggle of war after war, conqueror after conqueror, friend after friend, ally after ally, in a dance of death with no end in sight. Between the star nations, the empires, and the alliances, humanity had occupied a strange relationship. Some factions decided that humans were too primitive to matter. Others had never even heard of them, and a few believed that humans had hidden potential. In any case, with no major fleet sightings nor advanced military operations demonstrated in public, the galactic polity had codified their views on the matter with Earth and its colonies marked as neutral observers at best and insignificant bystanders at worst. This was the perception for decades, even as the flames of interstellar war burned hotter. Across sectors and worlds, the relentless fiery sweep of the expansionist Kadrashi dominion engulfed resource-rich worlds and splintered ancient alliances. Their war machine was widespread and unrelenting. Entire fleets of enemy warships were ground to dust beneath the weight of the Dominion's gargantuan dreadnoughts, and worlds upon worlds bent the knee to their untamable aggression. The MYRR Imperium and the Rayon Collective were locked in a war on several fronts, with the various factions struggling to maintain control over important star systems. Allies were arranged in desperation, but the Kadrashi Dominion was gaining momentum, and momentum, many thought, was invincible. Amidst this galactic turmoil, humanity became a distant onlooker. Earth was outside the main focus of the conflict, so a battered warship rarely limped close enough to request immediate aid. Human vessels, dedicated overwhelmingly to discovery and knowledge, had never participated in a major theater of conflict. The diplomatic overtures extended toward them were politely rejected. Some speculated that humans were inwardly focused, developing advanced technology in-house, or hoarding it, and keeping it away from the aliens. Others dismissed the idea as make-believe, seeing no evidence for such a leap in ability. So when the Kadrashi Dominion finally turned its gaze on the resource-laden rim worlds of the MYRR Imperium, where the humans had set up small, diplomatic missions, hardly anyone expected that humans would intervene. Maybe they will do things like the formal condemnation or offer meager support. But no one anticipated that they would dispatch a warship. In fact, the notion struck the Dominion's admirals as laughable. Even if humanity did manage to send a ship to assist the MYRR Imperium, it would be too little, an easily destroyed trophy to display the Dominion's supremacy and further sow terror. But unbeknownst to everyone, including many powerful humans, a top-secret fleet program had been percolating for years at Earth's distant shipyards orbiting Mars, Io, and new terraformed colonies. Guided by the inspired minds of humanity's ancient martial histories, it sought to heed the unflattering lessons learned from ancient Earth battles, but writ large, across many systems. The project merged centuries of data from minor skirmishes with next-gen propulsion systems, offensive fields of fire, and exotic armaments. Each piece of new tech showed up in hush-hush trials run in the emptiest corners of human-controlled space. The crown jewel of this clandestine fleet was the HSS Dauntless, a formidable warship capable of rivaling the battlecruisers employed by the most advanced of alien armed forces, manned by seasoned officers who had pored not only over Earth's vast records of war, from sword and shield cavalry engagements to nuclear deterrence, but also who had gleaned tactical insight from hidden intelligence on alien militaries. The Dauntless was meant to be more than a show of strength. It was a statement that humanity would not be ignored anymore. When the MYRR Imperium, teetering toward collapse on the fringe of its colonies, finally contacted humanity for help, Earth's highest council met in emergency session. The debate was fierce. Some claimed that humanity's secrecy had sheltered it from the worst horrors of galactic war. Any engagement now, they insisted, would put a target on the whole species. Others felt that stepping up was a matter of conscience. See, if they either turned a deaf ear to the MYRR Imperium's entreaties, then the Dominion would no doubt come for them next, after they have laid waste to more easily reachable quarry. Ultimately, the Council greenlit just one order: deploy one vessel as a show of force. Show that mankind will not go along with tyranny. And so HSS Dauntless departed its hidden berth, solo. The Dominion's admirals and generals chuckled at the intelligence reports of a human ship approaching. They'd heard every rumor of advanced Earth ships that had reached his subjects before, and not one particle of verifiable evidence had supported the notion that humans could compete with their war fleets. To them, the Dauntless was just another curious chunk of space detritus to be burned and blasted to oblivion. For the MYRR Imperium, though, this was salvation. Officially, they expressed relief that humanity would unite. Unofficially, their high command saw the human ship's intervention as an act of desperation. They needed more than words. They needed a miracle. The timing could scarcely have been more fraught. The Dominion had cut off key shipping lines, endangering the Imperium's richest industrial planet, Valurus. This crowded planet was teetering on the brink of a resource collapse. If it fell, the Imperium's internal supply lines would collapse. Defeat would be inevitable. That was the stakes. Stand the Dominion off or see the last major power that could resist the conquerors go the way of history. Fearing the day of battle, Dominion forces sailed over the orbit of Valurus, creating a great blockade. A fleet of immense battlecruisers and carriers bristling with weapons surrounded a perimeter, primed to wreaking havoc on any brave enough to bust the lines. MYRR ships, bruised and battered from weeks of fighting, hung in defensive patterns around Valurus's moon base. Half crippled and desperate, morale was at rock bottom. They had all wondered whether the rumored ship would even come. Then it occurred, an angry rupture of space-time, signaling a hyperspace transit at extreme range. With the MYRR ships scrambling to identify the newcomer, the Dominion's sensor platforms raised the alarm. Something big was heading straight into the blockade. The more adventurous of the Dominion admirals went to roll their eyes, until the readings stabilized, displaying unprecedented energy readings for a single hull. Despite all sane predictions, the MYRR Imperium's comm channels flared with a simplistic, unencrypted message. This is the HSS Dauntless, representing Earth and her human colonies. For the good of the Imperium against tyranny. Prepare to fire on our mark. Both sides became paralyzed in that moment. None of the Dominion admirals wanted to admit it, but some of them had a glimmer of doubt. Could the humans have really constructed something powerful enough to threaten their war machine? Most thought it was a bluff. They had never attributed to humanity either the will or the means for industrial-scale violence. So they forged ahead, confident that humanity's entry into the fight would prove little more than a footnote to their inexorable march forward, or so they thought. It started with an eerie silence. The Dauntless was suspended in the blackness of space at what seemed an impossible vantage, and holding position at the Dominion's flank, while less than half a light second from the blockade. Dominion sensors attempted to lock on the intruder, but the warship's electromagnetic signature was erratic, as if it was broadcasting and cloaking at the same time. MYRR scouts sent keyboards shredding reports of a vast silhouette of horizontal lines and rounded angles. No pronounced bridge or turret profile, just a dark, high-tech fuselage intermittently oriented by the coils of a strobing reactor. And then the Dominion opened fire in a volley of brilliant light. The nearest frigate vomited columns of plasma toward the Dauntless, and larger cruisers trained railguns and ion cannons on it. More than a dozen beams focused on the lone target, each able to turn a typical warship into molten scrap in a matter of seconds. But something impossible happened. The energy beams bent around the Dauntless like the flow of a river when a rock diverts the water around it, scattering in wild arcs of brilliant color. The warship withstood the barrage without apparent damage. On the MYRR bridge decks, dazed officers stared at their sensor screens. "They're absorbing it," one lieutenant yelled as he scanned the readouts. Indeed, the data suggested some variety of advanced defensive lattice, far beyond standard shield technology. The Dominion's barrage should have wreaked havoc, but not even the Dauntless paint was marred. Dominion's admirals too proud to slow their assault. More warships swooped, hurling destructive energies at the still motionless human vessel. The emptiness of space exploded like a fireworks show. Furious pulses of plasma hammered unceasingly. Rail slugs screamed by at near relativistic velocities, and missiles whistled across the star-speckled void. Even so, the Dauntless would not crack. The ship shimmered with light as it weathered the storm, and the Dominion fleet erupted into nervous chatter as the intimidating thing began to turn. Finally, Captain Naomi Zhao's voice rang over every Allied channel. All MYR vessels, we will be opening a corridor in order for you to break the blockade. Get ready to trail in our wake. There was no nervousness in her voice, only assured calm. And then, in that moment, the Dauntless bloomed to life. Hundreds of concealed barrel-like openings lit up along its hull, unleashing torrents of pulses that overthrew the laws of conventional warfare. Each projectile was loaded with a micro-singularity wrapped up in a complex gravitational envelope, developed in secret labs under Earth's strict guidelines. Now freed, these alien munitions cut through Dominion lines like a red-hot knife through ice. Within seconds, one of the Dominion's largest battlecruisers staggered from direct hits. Its hull twisted, as if in a gravitational wave, cracking along lines of stress. Patches of armor peeled off, exposing full decks to vacuum. The other Dominion vessels immediately redeployed, firing volleys of missiles and winged fighters in a desperate countersalvo. But the Dauntless surged onward with steady determination, its superior point defense systems raking through the torrent of incoming ordnance. On board the Dominion flagship Hegner's Will, Admiral Cormac's hearts thundered against his breastplate. His hoped-for coup needed no blockers because now his blockade was in disarray. Target all dreadnoughts on that vessel, he barked, with an uncharacteristic tremor in his voice. Cripple it, or we'll lose our whole formation. Despite their numbers being at 7-1, Dominion always found themselves outmatched. The Dauntless threaded a path through the blockade, leaping between points with the latest in FTL microjump technology. Jump drives had existed in the galaxy for centuries, but the human warship deployed them with an agility and precision which contradicted standard tactical doctrine. One moment, it was 100 kilometers off the starboard flank of a Dominion cruiser. The next it blinked out of sensor range, reappearing only to seize a position that would allow it to fire on the cruiser's unprotected stern. The confusion was used to advantage by MYR captains. Their battered ships, which had previously been pinned by the blockade, took advantage of the moment to power through, flanking Dominion vessels already disoriented by the Dauntless assault. Soon, the battlefront evaporated from straight lines into frenzied skirmishes. Dominion groups attempted to regroup, but the human warships scattered them with cannon fire that punched gaping holes in their formation. But the Dominion was no novice at war, and hunger sharpened their instincts. A dozen well-positioned Dominion vessels focused overlapping areas of ion disruption in the hopes of short-circuiting the Dauntless defenses. For a brief instant, the human warships' refulgent corona shivered, having to divert power. The gap was exploited by Dominion fighters, which fired repeated micro-torpedoes into the Dauntless' exposed sections. Flames bloomed across the starship's hull, and for the first time, Captain Zhao felt the ship shudder from direct impact. Red lights illuminated her stoic face as alarms gave shrill cries. The Dominion's capital ships drew close, eager for the advantage. A handful of the MYR vessels attempted an intercept, but their bruised superstructure was no match for the Dominion's undamaged battleships. The Dauntless was now under dual attack, fighters annoying from every angle, and heavy warships targeting her with beam cannons powerful enough to vaporize entire continents. And Zhao had foreseen that possibility. All decks, initiate Alpha Shift, she commanded. With a release of power from the containment ring at the Dauntless center, the human warship had brought its primary shield configuration online. The scoured outer skin cracked open in places, exposing a smooth layer of black armor plated beneath that flared with raw lashings of energy. The next barrage from the Dominion was countered by the sudden augmentation of the Dauntless' defensive fields. The new shield array threw off threads of azure arcs that absorbed beams of plasma, transforming them into chips of harmless light. Amidst the whirls of chaos, the Dauntless rail lines ignited, routing power to the prow. Then a single focused beam shot forward, slicing into the front Dominion battleship. The resulting blast sailed into a shockwave that sent down smaller vessels, producing a brief but needed gap in the formation. The MYR squads capitalized, plunging into the Dominion blockade's soft underbelly. Admiral Cormac struggled to retain control. "Titan formation," he roared into the comms. "Cut them off. Surround the MYRR flagship." But communications were haphazard. Every Dominion captain engaged in private struggles for survival. Under the persistent human assault, they were also fracturing. Their carefully set plot to wipe out MYRR reinforcements in one decisive push was coming apart. Making his move, Captain Zhao beamed a line directly to the MYRR High Commander. "We're opening a path. Whatever you've got, shove it down that corridor. We'll handle the big guns." Even the deadpan MYRR High Commander sounded almost breathless as he answered. "Understood. We're with you." But even with the dauntless successes, there was a serious threat in the sheer weight of Dominion numbers. It was a blockade across an unknown number of kilometers of space, a wall of dozens of battleships, frigates, carriers, and corvettes layered across one another. The Dauntless was good at drawing fire, but it couldn't be everywhere at once. Scourge bombers pelted along the line, hammering at MYR squadrons that had been trying to break free. Periodic flashes chased the stars as MYR ships were torn apart. The Dauntless had tipped the scale, but the fight was still well short of assured success. Alien leaders around the sector looked on in stunned silence, each catching incomplete transmissions of the carnage taking place. Every time a piece of footage from the Dauntless passed through their secret intercept channels, the Rayon Collective's supreme leader gripped her seat. The Prime Minister for the Cordishire Federation suspended trade negotiations to catch live intel updates, sweat dotting her brow. No single warship had ever challenged so many Dominion vessels so successfully. Panic swept the Dominion's outer rims, whispers igniting like flame. If one human warship can do this, what if they send more? On the outer fringes of the maelstrom, the battered MYR Imperium flagship Valiant Dreams pulled her battered escort into formation led by the Dauntless. Dominion battleships attempted to block the corridor one by one, each promptly lashed aside or forced to take flight under the human warship's punishing barrage. Fragments of hull floated right in the void of the stars, an ominous graveyard of Dominion steel. Desperate now, the Dominion loosed fresh horrors from their bunks. Huge biomechanical monstrosities flew forth from docking bays, capital ship-scale, living weapons designed to shrug off conventional energy-based ordnance. Several MYR officers lapsed into cowardly disbelief when they beheld these massive things blundering through the void, flapping their scythe-like wings /clinicis across the black, each of their forms alive with kindling tentacles tipped with acid potent enough to eat through baseline hull plating. The Dominion felt the Dauntless had yet to be tested by such vile aggressiveness. But the humans, having undergone their own biological warfare in ancient times on Earth, were not as unprepared as the Dominion had thought. The Dauntless fired specialized warheads carrying a highly effective cryogenic formula that froze the vacuum-hardened hide. Within seconds, the titanic beasts, frozen cries of terror froze into ice, were rendered to pulp by normal mass drivers. Dominion admirals, watching their prized biotech eradicated in minutes, felt dread slink up their spines. With the threat from the biotech neutralized, Captain Zhao rallied her crew for a final assault. "We've got them on the ropes. We're going to stop this," she said evenly. The crew knew the stakes. If they hesitated now, if they let the Dominion regroup, Earth would not only face retribution, but an unstoppable enemy that had harvested valuable information about human technology. They needed to land a blow that was decisive enough to not leave any doubt about what role humanity would play in the galaxy. The Dauntless roared ahead, engines screaming with borrowed power from its experimental zero-point reactor. With MYR corvettes darting in and out of Dominion lines, it lined up for an assault on the Dominion's largest dreadnought, the Iron Scepter. It was said to have once annihilated entire fleets. But now, it floated uncertainly, buffeted by the maelstrom of activities surrounding it. Convincing themselves that the Dauntless could still be salvaged, the Iron Scepter prepared a super-heavy plasma lance, which would direct a frankly insane amount of energy towards the Dauntless. Even MYR ships withdrew in preparation for the apocalyptic collision. In the calm before the storm, Admiral Cormac sent a final, desperate threat broadcast. "Turn back. Humans, you cannot endure the full force of our might. Captain Zhao's response was brief. You will see. The iron scepter loosed its shot, a beam brightening space like a star being born. The Dauntless appeared likely to be overwhelmed for a few heartbeats. The beam crashed against the warship's freshly configured shields, bolts of lightning dancing amongst the meeting energy streams. The hull of the Dauntless burned molten red around the point of impact. Atmosphere vented from microfractures in the ship's plating. But the Dauntless would not give in. Instead, it poured all its reserves into a single, searing jag of exotic weaponry from its prow. The ship shook with a savage thrum that sent shockwaves through the MYRR cruiser's hulls miles away. When the bolt met the iron scepter, the dreadnought's bow portion shattered, torn into nothingness. A blazing disk of sunlit flame burst through the flagship's internal compartments. The blast wave swept up fighter wings, frigates, and anything else too proximate. Even the Dauntless had to protect itself from the furious aftershock, and in its place was an expanding cloud of debris and ionized gas that used to be the Dominion's most powerful warship. The destruction of that apex dreadnought, in an overwhelming show of force, shattered Dominion morale. Ships split from formation, some leaping into FTL, abandoning the blockade entirely, others surrendering to MYRR, or drifting out of effective range. The blockade was broken. As the Dominion lines fell apart, cascades of relief rocked MYRR channels. The planet Valurus, teetering at the edge of extinction by resource starvation, held its breath for the first time as the blockade parted. Freighter convoys waited in nervous anticipation in the usual shadows of the moon base, running convoys through the newly cleared lanes. Sensor-confirmed safety and cheers erupted from MYRR command decks. A whole world's population saved from Dominion enslavement, thanks to the intervention of a lone warship. Back on the Dauntless, the crew rushed to determine damage. At the starboard midsection, hull plating glowed from almost molten heat, while whole compartments had been blown by the Dominion's most heavy attacks. Medics raced in to care for injured crew members who had suffered injuries caused by jarring impacts and hull breaches. Smoke and sparks trailed along some hallways, but otherwise the ship was functioning. Captain Zhao skimmed the damage reports on her console and allowed herself a small, tired smile. She keyed the comm. All sections, great work. Damage control parties, set priorities on casualties and critical systems. Helm, bring us to their side, on the MYRR flagship. We'll make a final sweep. Having the Dominion. In disarray, MYRR vessels launched their own methodical pursuit. If things were normal, the Imperium would destroy every ship of the Dominion, but they were already at a disadvantage. It had to regroup, build up, and hold a defensive periphery. But the MYRR had no plans to allow high-value Dominion property to slide away unpunished. These smaller MYRR attack craft harried the fleeing Dominion ships, forcing them to jump out of the system or be captured. The field of stars was beginning to grow quiet, to be replaced by the flicker of emergency beacons and sputtering distress calls. On the Dominion's side, the shock was incalculable. Admiral Cormac, who had just fled to a rear staging frigate as his flagship detonated, stared at the tactical feed in disbelief. Not only had the most powerful dreadnought in their blockade been destroyed, but the whole strategic plan had fallen apart. Any ships that lingered by Valurus either raised white flags of surrender or inched away to a safe jump distance. The invincible empire he had once believed in so deeply was left grappling with a humiliating defeat, wrought by a novice force from a not remotely glamorous world. In the meantime, the Dauntless moved in quiet determination across the debris-covered battlefield. Captain Zhao provides the MYRR High Commander with a direct comm link. "Commander," she said, her voice low but firm. "Valurus is safe for now, but we must defend the sector to guard against a Dominion counterstrike. We suggest we release them all." The MYRR High Commander, clearly exhausted from the exchange, thanked her in return. "Your vessel's capabilities, we never knew. We have to regroup. We have few forces remaining to pursue them along multiple vectors." "We'll assist," Zhao offered. "The Dauntless can't be everywhere at once, but we have overheat their auxiliary station to ensure they can't regroup in this sector. If you hit them from the opposite side, we can form a pincer and push them out." The MYRAR Imperium's scattered fleet deployed in position along important FTL egress vectors after a hasty strategic meet, with the Dauntless taking up position on the major transit route. Dominion vessels trying to slip through were shot at by both sides, compelled to take the chance of surrender or face quick annihilation. During several hours of tension, the Dominion's presence in the Valurus system was annihilated or driven away into deep space. When the last unfriendly contact disappeared from local sensors, a silence seemed to fall on the bruised MYRR armada. The price had been steep. Multitudes of MYRR vessels had been destroyed. Valurus's orbit had been strewn with debris. But the blockade was over, and the planet would survive. Supply ships were already racing toward the surface, loaded with food and medical supplies for the population below. Word spread throughout the galaxy faster than light. In a matter of hours, news flew of a lone human warship defeating a blockade that had been thought unbreakable by the Dominion. Rumors exaggerated the story even more. Some claimed the Dauntless bore some sort of doomsday weapon, one that could wipe out entire star systems. Some others insisted that Earth was home to a fleet of hundreds, if not thousands, of such ships. It was a swirl of confusion, speculation, and creeping certainty that few could make out. But one thing that was soon apparent: it was not wise to underestimate a species. Panic broke out in the ruling council of the Dominion's capital. They called for an immediate report on the human supership and the way it had killed the Iron Scepter. As rival factions inside the Dominion's power structures pointed fingers and traded blame over failures to anticipate human involvement. After all, they'd committed vast resources to intelligence networks throughout the galaxy. How had they overlooked Earth's secret emergence of advanced technologies? There were whispers. Was the Dauntless singular, or just the sharp end of the spear? On Earth, the leaders who had ordered the deployment of the Dauntless watched the transmissions with somber, silent pride. It was an historic win, but it also was a statement of purpose. The delusions that humanity was a weightless force had been blown away. Most on the Council understood that once the Dominion nursed its wounds, it may want revenge. The price of emerging from the shadows would only continue to climb, but Earth had made its choice. Back to Valurus, the Dauntless hung in low orbit, a silent sentinel. Official statements praising humanity's heroics prepared in command centers across the MYRR Imperium. The MYRR High Commander had personally escorted him through the innards of the warship, taken aback by the technology that adorned the corridors: advanced energy distribution nodes, shield modulators humming at a nearly imperceptible frequency, and weapon systems whose signatures would be impossible to classify using standard methodology. MYRR leadership then understood they now had a formidable ally, one who had altered the whole strategic landscape. The Imperium, for the first time in decades from the brink of ruin, could lay down roots with confidence. Once the fighting quieted, MYRR and human leaders held a conference on board the Dauntless. Captain Zhao headed the Earth delegation. The MYRR High Commander and his staff were the Imperium's interested party. For the first time, humans were on near equal footing with the galaxy's established powers. Terms were negotiated. The MYRRN requested continued human assistance against Dominion incursions, offering intelligence sharing, trade routes, and access to rarefied materials. Representatives from Earth, they emphasized, were there to preserve freedom and prevent rampant expansion by tyrannical regimes. It was an alliance forming, forged in the crucible of war. Outside, the debris field surrounding Valurus stretched long shadows across the planet, reminding it of how close to complete obliteration it had once been. Crews scrambled to salvage any intact Dominion technology that could provide clues about its next moves. Wrecked MYRR ships lazily drifted, each hull a muted tribute to the steep price of the struggle. Stoically, MYRR rescue shuttles scoured the battlefield for survivors. She had the Dauntless' own medical wing accept wounded MYRR crew, subjecting them to advanced methods of human triage. The unlikelier, and harder to doubt, sense of a bond, one that had evaded both civilizations for millennia, and across light years and paranoia, started to germinate. In strategic far-flung Pida Terrace from Valurus, new powers masked their mischief-making as they observed the events unfold. The highest leadership of the Rayon Collective quietly restructured their fleets, expecting the Dominion to attack elsewhere, or that they themselves would be the next target of human intervention. The Courtisher Federation debated whether to send envoys to Earth, seeking some rapport before hostilities erupted. The whole galactic chessboard was being shifted in a matter of days, the result of the arrival of a lone starship. On the other hand, the crew of the Dauntless was under the galactic limelight at the center position. Messages of respect and requests for interviews flooded the warship's comm channels. Human media outlets celebrated the news and hailed the ship's crew as heroes. Outwardly calm, Captain Zhao understood that their early success was only the beginning. She'd seen the power of the Dominion firsthand, and while the blockade had been broken, an empire the size of the Kadrashi Dominion operated on a scale that would not be easily cowed. They would reorganize. They would challenge Earth's resolve once more. But for the moment, a hard-won defeat had been redeemed. Symbolically, the MYRR High Commander bestowed upon Zhao an ancient ceremonial blade from the Imperium's own storied past, in gratitude and recognition that they owed their survival to humanity's timely and decisive intervention. Zhao received the offering humbly, in honor of the many MYRR who had previously sacrificed their lives to hold the line. They even arrived in Dauntless. An unspoken agreement loomed over the minds of the human and MYRR leaders. The galaxy would never be the same. MYRR's shattered fleets were pieced back together and Dauntless was readied for further campaigns, and a new alliance forged itself in the galaxy's depths, one that would soon reshape the entire conflict. And with the final Dominion warship limping from the sector, both warp coils sputtering invalid energy signatures, the Battle of Valuris came to a close. Within that delicate stillness, the weight of what had occurred took hold. A single human war vessel, mostly unfamiliar and unproven on the galactic scene, had taken down one of the Dominion's most powerful blockades. The war would go on, but without humanity watching from the sidelines. For that day, at least, the Dauntless and its insubordinate crew were victorious in orbit, a testament to humanity's strength, ingenuity, and audacity. The shattered end of Dominion steel sundered in the planetary atmosphere stood as a dire warning to anyone who might underestimate the Earth warship's power. And all over the galaxy, from the finest alien palaces to the most humble frontier settlements, one thing was on everyone's mind. The humans had come, and they had made everything different. The shockwaves of the dauntless victory rippled through the galaxy in the days after the landmark battle. Diplomats from far-flung star systems vied on Earth for a hearing, proposing alliances or trade agreements. For some, it was an effort to gain a strong ally. For others, it was a venture to know more about this recently uncovered human technology that could bend energy beams and penetrate even the armor of the previously unmatched Dominion dreadnoughts. Political unrest shook the very core of the Kadrashi Dominion, their government. And the admirals who had once declared their unstoppable conquests now whispered nervously with one another. They had always been confident that raw size and numbers would enable them to overpower any adversary. And the sudden show of force by humanity proved them perilously out of touch. The demand and need for a new countermeasure soared. Undetected laboratories raced around the clock, striving to create systems as sophisticated as or more so than their creators. The Dominion's xenocentrist propaganda, which never failed to portray humanity as weak, was not immune to scrutiny. Soldiers and citizens included, they demanded to know, how could a lesser species rebel against our empire and win? For the MYRR Imperium, the answer came as a taste of renewed hope that gave color to their worlds and sound to their voices. Out of the carcass of Valuris sprung repair and rebuilding projects, rekindling a sense of unity. MYRR officers who had fought alongside the Dauntless spoke of near-miraculous heroics, a starship that not only shrugged off the Dominion's best stabs at it, but could hit back with terrifying precision, became folklore among the humans of the Imperium by word of mouth. But beneath that admiration lay an awareness that humans now were crucial allies and irresistible weapons. The leaders of the Imperium understood the need for a balanced partnership. Celebrations on Earth gave way to a solemn hush. The Dauntless crew were heralded as heroes. The families of the valiant officers lined city streets, bathing in the fairest of weather. On the day of a rapturous return broadcast, screaming and drumming for those whose efforts had demonstrated the worth of humanity on a galactic scale. The people finally glimpsed advanced technologies sequestered for so long. Pride soared, but so did caution. Many knew that the Dominion would not endure such a defeat quietly. The war was still burning on multiple fronts, with Earth having just declared itself a player in the greatest power struggle that the known galaxy had ever known. Captain Zhao and her officers were thrust into the spotlight. Earth's council political leaders hailed their audacity and sacrifice, bestowing accolades in lavish ceremonies. News reports played the battle footage on repeat, praising the crew's cool under fire and the genius of their tactics. Interviews with surviving MYRR officers painted a picture of the Dauntless as once almost mythical in its capabilities. Every retelling further cemented the crew's status as pioneers of a new chapter in human history. But the pressures of newfound fame and an ever so more newfound war were heavy on them. Each member of the crew carried some scar, physical, emotional, or otherwise, from the brutal struggle overhead on Valuris. Some had lost friends when compartments were compromised or systems overloaded. They knew better than anyone that the Dominion was an enemy capable of horrible atrocities. Silently, they entered into a compact, to be poised for the wars to come, and to work relentlessly to secure humanity's safety on this broader, more treacherous stage. Meanwhile, engineers and scientists labored day and night in the research facilities orbiting Mars and other distant colonies to whip the dauntless systems into shape, tighten weaknesses, and write upgrades. Watching as the galactic attention poured forth, Earth's leaders resolved to speed up construction of additional warships. They were afraid that they would be painting a target on the Earth above, but they also recognized that even a single mighty ship was not strong enough to face the full might of the Dominion. And thus the galaxy regarded humanity with new laces of caution. For dozens of centuries, the great powers had waged war, negotiated alliances, and battled for control of valuable star systems. All that time, humanity had been a backwater fascination. Now, the Kadrashi Dominion staggered from a crippling blow, and analysts across the stars knew that the fragile balance of power had been forever altered. Admirals plotted new strategies in war councils on distant planets that included contingencies for human intervention. Trade guilds suggested trade routes connecting Earth to strong economies. Diplomatic envoys dispatched missions to the Sol system, each carrying enticements or appeals. But behind all these machinations lay an undeniable, unfaltering truth. Humanity had fought its way into the galactic table in a defiance against the most powerful military force in known universe, and they'd won. The crew of the Dauntless were the face of humanity's unflagging resolve. Where once there could be no question of the galaxy ever being told about a human warship, now entire star clusters reverberated with tales of their intrepidity. As the Dauntless and its brethren set out for their next deployment, delivering hope to allies and dread to enemies, they carried with them the simple, resonant message that echoed through every star system. The panic gripping their hostile counterparts was entirely warranted. Humans were here, and they were firmly planted, and they weren't going anywhere.